As always, if you have questions as we go through this, don't hesitate to just interrupt me or something. Just say, hey, Terry, I have a question. And as long as it's related to what we're talking about, we're in good shape. I don't like the chat is hard for me to follow back and forth when I'm trying to share, and then I have to go down to the chat and read what it says. And so there's a little confusion there, probably on my on my part, but just go ahead and interrupt me. I'm not offended. Today we're going to talk about two things mainly, but it kind of goes hand in hand. Countdown to closing, which are all the things that we need to do to get a file closed, and the life of an escrow, which is all the things that are going on concurrently with the things that we're doing. So here we have an accepted offer, yay. Now your work is just starting. Yes, you went out and you showed property perhaps, or you took a listing perhaps, whatever you directed, but the same items need to occur. It's just whose responsibility it is. And that's what we're going to try to go through here a little bit today. So here's a little checklist that I put in there for you. And the checklist is not 100%. It's kind of like your sky slope checklist in a way. And that is that some things are in here that you may not need in every case. So there's more than what you might need, but it's just a good idea to pay attention to it and see that you at least have the things that you need to close your escrow. So the first thing we're looking for, and the first thing you should be looking for, is an offer and a counter offer and any addendums or contingencies all executed. And executed means that they're signed by all parties involved. So an offer that comes in, the RPA, which is the offer, the residential purchase agreement, that comes in and you go over it with your seller and they initial where they're supposed to initial and they sign where they're supposed to sign. And there may be a little checkbox in that offer that says that this is subject to a counter offer, in which case we're looking for a counter offer that has signatures. The offer still needs to be signed, and the counter offer is in addition to it, additionally needs to be signed. If there are any addendums at that time, they would need to be signed. And when I'm talking about addendums at that time, I'm talking about maybe the manufactured home addendum, because the residential purchase agreement covers all residents, even manufactured homes and things, or condos. So all of those things are in there, but there may be a manufactured home addendum. There may be a probate addendum that tells you that this is a probate property and that other people are involved, or possibly a court or something. Contingencies. So the main contingency you have at this point in time, because the other contingencies are in the offer, but the main contingency you have at this point in time, and you have to look for and make sure it's signed by everybody, is the contingency for sale of their property. If the buyer is trying to sell a property, then they need to have specified that on the RPA, and it needs to have the COP, contingency for purchase or sale of replacement property, needs to be involved. So all of those things must be executed in order for us to have a viable contract. And the date on those things is the last date that it's signed. Now the date up on top, it'll say date prepared. That's the date the paperwork was put together. But the day that the contract actually starts is when all of these things are signed and initialed. Once you get to that point, then you look for the items that download with the RPA. That's the agency relationship. That's the PRBS, the CCP. PRBS is possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. CCP is California. That's the safety, I guess, for lack of a better word, it's the paperwork safety. We don't give our paperwork out to anybody except for those that are absolutely necessary. And the fair housing, all signed. That's all makes up the purchase agreement. Now, the intake sheet, and I'm gonna take that off of there. Some people are using it and some people aren't, but we have an intake sheet that we used to use all the time. And I think I should just cross that out now because still a few people are using it, but basically it's a sheet that puts all the information on one page. Now there's another page that comes out, it's called a cover sheet. Some people are using that. Some people are using what's called a sales report. So we have a lot of different things going on there, but basically it's a sheet that ties everything together. Who the buyer is, who the seller is, who the lender is, who the escrow is, who the title company is, who the, everything that's in the contract goes on almost like a summary page. Has phone numbers on it, it has addresses on it, and it has all of those things. And we would put those together. It's about probably a 30% of the people are using something similar to that, the other 70 aren't. Some people are still doing it the way that I always have done it in my life, and that is to get one of those fancy file folders from the title company, and then I keep all my information on there and just slip the paperwork inside, so I always have access to it. However, generally what we're doing today, in most cases, and there are still some people that don't use TCs, they feel comfortable in doing it themselves, but generally what we're doing today is that we have a TC. That's a transaction coordinator. That's somebody that we pay either through escrow or outside of escrow to make sure that all our paperwork is complete and all the signatures are in the right place, and that they get uploaded into SkySlope. So on day one, you should be opening your order with your TC. Call a TC. We have several of them that are company approved TCs. There are some people that are using independent ones, but you can get names from other agents in the office that you work out of, because everybody's, every office has some specific people and things that they work with because of convenience, and it doesn't really matter as long as they're gonna take care of you. So either the agent or the TC will open the order or the all of the information that they have in SkySlope. And that's all on day one. Those things happen immediately. And when we have all of those things done, the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to open escrow. And open escrow happens a lot of different ways. Open escrow can be opened by the seller's agent. It can be opened by the buyer's agent. It can be opened by the TC of one or other of the agents. But once it's opened, escrow will assign an escrow number to it, to that specific address. So even if there was duplication and you tried to do it and I tried to do it, once they typed it in, it would say that address has already been registered and would you like to replace it type thing. So obviously you're not gonna duplicate and have more than one person do escrow. You can discuss that with the other agents sometimes, perhaps if they're using FRS. If they're using 21st century escrow, or our independent escrow, one of the full realty services escrow companies, then you can identify it, you can call them, you can hand carry it into them if you happen to be close enough in the office. It doesn't matter, but they need that paperwork that you filled out. They need the offer, the signed offer. They need counter offers that are involved. They need those things in order to prepare their escrow instructions. Okay, disposition of the EMD. That's the earnest money deposit on the contract. It says that within 3 days, and it says business days, buyer will wire to escrow the amount of money that the EMD was for. So whatever that earnest money deposit is, that's the money that they have to have within 3 days, or if you change that because of a holiday or something. But remember, business days exclude a holiday. So for instance, we're coming up on Christmas. And if I wrote an offer on the 23rd. Christmas is not a business day, so that day would be excluded. The day after Christmas and let's see, that's Thursday and Friday, they would both be included as business days. Saturday and Sunday would not, and Monday would. So actually, if I wrote an offer on Christmas Eve, the following Monday, which is almost a week, would be the first day that business day that could be, that the bank will have it, that the wire transfer can be done, because when you're dealing with wire transfers, you're at the hands of a bank for one thing. And you're also at the hands of an escrow company who is going to be closed on Saturday and Sunday. So you can pay attention to those things, but the contract defaults to by the third business day. Okay, so now we've got disposition of the EMD. We order our natural hazard disclosure if we haven't already done that. Perhaps if we were the listing agent, we already did that because we wanted to make sure of the things that the natural hazard disclosure talks about, so that we knew how to identify and we knew what additional disclosures might need to be made. But the natural hazard disclosure comes from a third party. Most of you know that. A couple of you are new, and so you may not know that, but a natural hazard disclosure, that's what NHD is. Talks about exactly that. It's a report that comes from a third party that identifies high fire areas, very high fire areas, flood areas, 100-year flood areas, liquefaction, which is the equivalent of quicksand, not really quicksand, but anyway, something that's built on a sandy surface. And it talks about that so that a buyer knows what it is that they're getting when they see a property. So we want to make sure that that's ordered if within the first couple of days, one way or the other. It only takes usually just a day to get here. So if I ordered one right now, we'd have it before class was over probably, because the addresses are already recorded with these third-party disclosure companies. And all they have to do is have somebody go over and pull it up on the computer and then forward it to us. And by them doing that, they have accomplished what it is we want, because it tells us about fire, flood, all those kind of things. And it's a disclosure that we're going to have to provide to the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. So both parties will have to sign off on that. If the contract calls for a wood pest inspection, and wood pest is several words to say termite, but wood pest is actually a better name. That's what it's actually called, is a wood pest inspection. And the reason it's called that is because there are pests that aren't just termites that do damage to wood. We have funguses, and we have dry rot sources, and we have different things that are pests that are doing that. So we order our pest inspection. We have several companies in all areas there. And in fact, there's a lot of overlapping of areas, but talk with other agents within your office and say, who do you use for your wood pen? Do you like them? Do they do a good job for you and things? So there are a lot of them that, like I say, overlap, but ask the agents in the individual offices that you're in, because they are the best resource for who's doing pest control work in the area and who's doing, well, I hate to say this, but they even have their list of I'll never use them again type thing. And obviously, if you can get the benefits of their having used things, well, how are you? If you can get the benefit of the knowledge of the other agents in your office who takes care of things in your area, you're better off. So that's where you go to find that out. Get that in. Notice it says inspection. So right now we're only getting the inspection done. we're probably not going to get work done yet. Maybe they wrote on their offer that they wanted a wood pest inspection and a certification and a clearance or whatever it happens to be. Maybe their loan requires a clearance for wood pests, and they may write that in the contract. But you don't necessarily need to get the work done right off the bat, and you probably couldn't anyway. You'll order the pest inspection. They'll go out and they'll come back and say, oh yeah, there's some termites here and there's some dry rot here and there's some fungus over here. And they'll tell you what's there and they'll give you an estimate as to how much it's gonna cost to get it done. But don't start that immediately because that deal might fall apart and any work that they do may not be enough to satisfy a next buyer that comes to the table. So don't order it right away. Make sure that your contract is moving along, but get your inspection done right away. Loan application process needs to be moving. Day 1 through 5, you know, when I get an offer or when I submit an offer, either way, I want to have a pre-approval letter from a lender. That's what I want my buyer to go in with. So hopefully, to get that pre-approval letter, the lender already started the loan application process. But if they didn't, because they didn't know a price yet, they didn't know what property you were looking at, they didn't know, all they knew was a price range that you qualified for. You may get a pre-qualification letter that does not specify an address, which means that the application process is probably not moving forward yet. The preliminary things are being done, credit checks are being done and things, but they're not moving ahead with the whole process. So day 1 through 5, we need to check with our lender or our buyer to find out whether or not that process has been started. If you feel uncomfortable about it, if you go way beyond these 5 days and nothing's been done, they haven't talked with the lender. I just put in here notice to buyer to perform. So we have a notice to perform. And we get that signed by our seller and we send it to the other agent and say, you know what, within 2 days, if you haven't gotten this done, the seller has the right to cancel this offer and move on. And people are worried about the notice to perform. So I listed it on here several different times, but the idea is that we're probably not going to cancel on a first notice to perform. We may. Because it says at the bottom, seller may cancel. It doesn't say consider this canceled or we're canceling this immediately or anything. It says that within 2 days that the seller could cancel or the buyer could cancel, depending on who the notice to perform was served on. So don't think of it as anything other than just kind of a warning letter that says, you know what, we need to be moving ahead on this. Appraisal ordered by the lender on days 5 through 7. Now, how do I know if that's been done? Well, I contact the lender and I let the lender know whether I'm representing the seller or the buyer. I let the lender know that I want to be the contact person for the appraiser. So call me when you're ready to get the appraisal done and I'll make sure you have access to the property. And the reason I like to do that is because number 1, I know that it's been ordered. Number 2, I know when they're coming. Number 3, if I go out to let them in, I know that they've been there. And number 4, if I have some new comps that have come up along the way that I think might solidify the price that we're trying to get out of it, that's a good opportunity for me to take some additional information. So I like to be that contact person. So anyway, that needs to be ordered within days 5 through 7. It'll probably be accomplished somewhere around day 10 or 12, something like that. Sometimes it's right away, sometimes it's a few days down the road. But the bottom line is I'm trying to get that ball rolling and keep it rolling. If somebody doesn't order the appraisal, if the lender says, oh, I haven't ordered that yet, you know, that's a little bit of a red flag to me. And that little bit of a red flag is that sometimes I know the lender is trying to do good by the buyer. The buyer has to pay for his appraisal. And the lender doesn't want the buyer to have to pay until they know they can qualify for the deal. Well, that's a little bit of a red flag to me because now you're telling me that you didn't know. You gave me the pre-approval letter the buyer was qualified, you only knew that based on what they told you they were qualified. So it's just a little bit of a red flag that I need to pay attention to. That's why I need to do it early in the transaction, so that I still have time to do something about it. By the time you get through the first week, you're gonna get escrow instructions. And we'll go over that when we hit escrow here in a couple of minutes, but we're gonna get escrow instructions. Yes, Lynn, do you have a question?
Yes, my question is on a listing or an offer. I asked for the pre-approval letter with the offer and as a requirement. What do you think of that?
That's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Okay, thank you.
I want to know as soon as possible. And you know, once my offer is signed, and some people get nervous about this, but they shouldn't. If you read through your RPA in detail. And I know that probably nobody has. They think they have because they skim through it and then they say, oh, I know about that. And so I know how it works. I understand. But anyway, in the RPA, there's actually a section in there that says that under this agreement, that either agent can contact the lender. And everybody signs off on that. So that's already a signed off thing. So it doesn't hurt for you to contact the lender. If you don't have what you want, and that's a good idea, Lynn, to try to get it up front. I prefer it up front. Sometimes a pre-approval letter will come to you with some stipulations, which are okay. Because then it tells you what kind of things need to be taken care of. Sometimes they're waiting for VOEs to come in. A VOE is a verification of employment. And they've ordered it. And so based on what they tell me they've made and what shows up on their last tax records, they qualify. But are you still employed? And are you still making the same amount of money? Or did this include a lot of overtime or whatever? So it gives you a chance to ask those questions to the lender. Gives you a chance to chat with the lender, let them know who you are and let them know that you're on top of the transaction. But having pre-approval is the best way. And if when I submit an offer, I always submit it with that little checkbox that says pre-approval letter attached or pre-approval attached, I think it says. So great idea. And if you can get that, that's the way I would go about it. If somebody sent me an offer without a pre-approval, I would call back that agent and ask them if they've gotten that taken care of or if that person has even been to a lender yet. So days 1 through 5, we're going to make sure that application process is moving. We're going to make sure that within the first week that the appraisal has at least been ordered. And then we're going to get our escrow instructions, and our escrow instructions will come to us all pretty and pink and everything, and they'll come to us with all the things that they pulled out of the contract that apply to getting the escrow closed. Now, escrow doesn't care about things like your disclosures. They don't care about your TDSs or your ESDs or your AVIDs or any of that stuff. They don't care about any of those. They care about what's in the contract itself. In fact, on the RPA itself, it says residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instruction. And then it identifies the paragraphs that the escrow is instructed to comply with. So escrow moves ahead based on that. So you'll get your escrow instructions, review those when you get them. You'll get them the same time they get sent out to everybody else. Take a look at them, see if they spelled anybody's name wrong, see if they got the address wrong by a digit, see if they've got everything in they've got the right close date. They've got all of the things in there that they need. Just read through them and review them. And then know that parts of them are going to the seller and parts of them are going to the buyer, and we're all getting exactly the same thing, which is what we're trying to accomplish. So seller disclosures to the agent no later than day 7. Now that's written in the contract. That's a contingency that we will have all reports and disclosures from the seller to the buyer by day 7. That's your transfer disclosure statement, your exempt seller disclosure. That's what ESD is on our little thing here. And that means that you've got a corporation or a trust or something or a trustee that's selling a property that hasn't ever lived in it and doesn't know where anything is or whether it works or anything else, they're not required to go find out if it works. SPQ is the seller property questionnaire. That is if the seller is living in the property or has lived in the property. PDR, the property disclosure report, we already talked about that. WPI is a couple of these things on here, like the WPI and things, that's your well, septic, and property identifier sheet. That's if I live out in the boonies someplace, am I on a well or do I have water? Am I on propane or do I have natural gas? What are the borderlines of the properties and things? So those are separate forms if you have them and if you need them. We don't need them all the time. It's like I was saying when we started this process today, that there's some of these forms that I've written in there that are just ones that I'd rather have you look at and go, why would I need this? That Terry, he's like off his rocker. That's okay. Talk to somebody and say, does this have to have that? And it may not, depending on what the situation is. The AVID, we always require an AVID. That is the agent's visual inspection disclosure. And we need to have all those things signed by the seller. And then we need to send them out to the buyer's agent. All right, so they have 17 days, and we're going to talk about that right here. They have 17 days to complete all their investigations. Part of their investigation is this list of things right here. Okay, all of these are part of the investigation period. So they have 17 days to look at all this and see what the seller tells them about the property and that the agent tells them about the property. And anything else that comes up, they also have the opportunity by then to look at, remember I said earlier to order, if they've got in there that they want a wood pest inspection, order it on day 1. So that by the time day 7 rolls around, you have that. Same thing with up here, we talked about the natural hazard disclosure or property disclosure. That's part of the things. If you order it between days 1 and 3, we'll have it by day 7 when we're supposed to send these things out. And you don't have to wait until day 7, by the way. You can send them out earlier than that. It's just that day 7 is the no later than that's written into the contract. They have 17 days to complete their investigations. So they have the right to all of those. This one that's a SBSA is a seller buyer. This is it's an advisor to both the sellers and the buyers, a statewide buyer seller advisory. And what it does is it's like 14 pages long, and it tells the seller all the things that the buyer has the right to inspect at their own cost, unless they've agreed to something different in the contract. They can have the roof inspected. They can hire a professional home inspector. They can get electricians in there because they think the house is too old and the electrical might be an issue. Any of those things, they can go on discovery things about the property lines and where's the corner of the property at. They can, whatever they want, they have the right to inspect. The seller understands that the buyer has the right to do all of those things. And as long as reasonable arrangements are made, has to comply with their investigation period for that 17 days. All right, we want those completed in 17 days. Request for repairs. So after you've had this time, you've had this 17 days to do your investigations and you've looked over all of the disclosures that the seller provided and the agent provided, and you had time to do a couple of your own things. You've done all of that stuff within the 17 days. Then 2 days later, if you're going to request repairs, there is a form that is a request for repairs. And it basically just says that based on disclosures and investigations that we would like to have this done and this done and this done and this done, and they give you an itemized list of requests for repairs. The seller has a couple of opportunities at this point in time. One is they could ignore it, because that's an option, says it right on the form itself. Is seller is not responsible to reply. So, but that's not the best way to go, that's just a way to go. So what usually would happen is on the repair request itself, there's a section where the seller can respond to what the buyer has asked for. Well, we will take care of item number 1 and item number 3 and item number 4, but we're not gonna take care of 2 and 5. At least everybody knows the buyer has the opportunity to move forward at that point, or he can cancel. And based on the fact that you won't repair the roof or whatever it happens to be. Or seller's response, that's a separate form. That if you can't answer it quickly on this little repair request, there's a little checkbox that says to see seller's response to repair request. And so you get that filled out, and that might say, we will fix 1, 2, and 3, and we'll give a $3,000 credit to escrow. And so you might get 2 or 3 things in there that are going to be repaired, and then some monetary, either a credit to escrow or which is probably what it's going to be, or a reduction in the purchase price. Okay, after we've done all of these things, we're still checking with our lender, hopefully. And the contract, unless adjusted, requires full loan approval within 17 days. Now understand that that is 17 business days. So that's not, and I think you all know what the difference is, but a business day is days that whoever you're dealing with actually does business. And calendar days is just first through the 10th or whatever it happens to be. Those are calendar days. Doesn't matter if they're Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, or anything else in there. A calendar day is just from day 1 to day whatever it happens to be. When you're talking about loan approvals, you're talking about business days. So 17 days after acceptance may not be, if you accept it on the 1st of December, the 17th is probably not going to be full loan approval because there's business days in there. But it goes till the end of the month. There's going to be Christmas in there. There's going to be New Year's in there. So like I said before, pay attention to your business days. Okay. Full loan approval means the appraisal came in okay. All of the verifications of employment and everything else are okay. We've got our payoffs from other lenders. If there's other loans involved, whatever is there is all done. All right, contingency removals for all contract contingencies. So contingency removal, there is a form that's actually called that, removal contingency. CR is what it's referred to, and it's a contingency removal. And at about day 18, or maybe it's day 21 because of bank closures and loan and stuff, we should have a contingency removal for all the contract contingencies. If we don't have that done, then we are actually taking kind of a passive position on the contract and just kind of saying, well, you know, they'll probably get them done. The agent told me they were doing the work or whatever. This actually ties the contingency down. If you don't get a contingency removal done from certain contract contingencies, then you actually have moved that to that kind of passive situation. You're not asking for it, so I'm not giving it to you type thing. The contingency removal asks for those to be done. Day 18 is the first day that you can send out a contingency removal, and on the contingency removal itself, and we'll go over that at a future time, but the contingency removal itself, it has broken down into contractual contingencies, and then it has a little remove all these contingencies except for. And you can actually put in there, except for loan contingency, or except for sale of buyer's property, or you can actually pull certain things out of those contingencies, but still complete all your other contractual contingencies, okay? Waive your investigation contingency, waive your appraisal contingency, waive your things like that, so you actually can do some of them. And you have to do them all. There is a checkbox on there to do them all. If they've done everything, if everything's done, if the loan is in place, if everything's, it's clear to close, we're moving in that direction, and blah, blah, blah. Then we can have a contingency removal that waives all contingencies. So by then, somewhere around day 17, when all the contingencies have been removed, this is the time we want to get started on work if necessary. So I did an inspection on wood pest. And it came out that there was $1,100 worth of work that needed to be done, because they found termites in the garage and they found termites in the, whatever, front eaves or something. So by day 18, you get your contingency removal on their investigation periods. And then you can move forward and get the work done if that was called for in the contract. If it wasn't called for in the contract, it may be called for in the repair request. Once they see that as the report that says, hey, there's termites, then they may ask for that. If the seller agrees to pay for it, then day 18 is the day to get on those. And other repairs, same thing. If you have a septic certification that needs to be done. Now, understand, and I should have covered this at the first, but I'll backtrack here for 10 seconds. And that is, this is based on a kind of like a regular 30 to 35 day escrow. Close of escrow to occur 35 days from date of acceptance or whatever. So that's what these dates are. These dates can change, because if somebody puts in there that they want a 14-day close of escrow, then day 18 doesn't work, does it? If they want a 14-day escrow, if they want a 21-day escrow, then all of these other days are going to be revised accordingly. So then we want all certifications in place by day 21 through 25. That means we need our clearance, we need our cert, we need our surveys, whatever it is that we have done by contract. Then we need to have those done day 21 through 25. So we need to check with our TC to find out if there's any, and hopefully you're checking with them all along. But check with them by the time we get to day 25, we need to have all of our files ready to be approved. Needs to be, our compliance department says that they'd like them when they're 85% ready. So if you've got all but a couple of forms missing, and you're going to have a couple of forms missing at this point because you don't have your estimated settlement fees from escrow and a couple of other things. But by the time you get to here, you need to make sure that we're in a position to close, wrap up, and hopefully get paid. So buyer's funds come in day 25 through 27. And the buyer's funds are the down payment and any other funds that they had to come in with to close escrow. Those can be wired in. They should be wired in. However, sometimes a cashier's check is okay. A personal check is not okay. And cash is never okay. We don't have anywhere to store cash around here, except for in my desk drawer. And I don't want cash in desk drawers. So we don't do anything with cash. We need it all backed up with paper. And the way to accomplish that is cashier's checks and or wire transfer. So the buyer needs to wire their funds into close escrow 25 to 27 days. Loan docs will be ready and a CD will be signed. The CD is the certificate of disclosure that the lender provides anybody who's getting a loan. And it has to be signed by the borrowers 3 days prior to signing their docs. That's why we're looking for these things to be ready in these 3 days here. Get your CD, you get your docs. Once you've got, yes.
Could you repeat those dates? You said the CD needs to be signed by the buyer.
Yes, the CD, which is a certificate of disclosure from the bank or the lender. And they have to send that out to the buyer 3 days before the buyer can sign loan docs.
Okay.
So,
So if, okay, today is the 20th, so the buyer would need to sign it today in order to sign loan docs on the 23rd? Is that what you,
yes,
okay,
yeah, that's exactly right. They have to sign them and the lender takes care of that. That's not, you don't have to take care of it. You just have to make sure that it's happening. So that's where your communication with the lender and communication with the other agents. I've had agents that say, oh yeah, well, I talked to the agent today and they said they're signing loan docs tomorrow. And that we can close tomorrow afternoon. Not actually, because tomorrow's a Saturday, but potentially it was in the middle of the week. And I said, so they've signed the CD? Oh, well, the CD just went out. Okay, well, so then they don't have loan docs ready for signing. They may have the loan docs ready, but they can't be signed yet. They have to be signed on a date that's 3 days after the CD. Okay, final walkthrough, good time to do it at the same time. If they come in to sign loan docs or come in to bring a cashier's check in to close escrow, that's a great time to have a final walkthrough and property verification done. Understand that the final walkthrough, and if you read over it, when you look at the verification of property condition, we call it a VP, but it's a final walkthrough is what it is. And just a few days before it's supposed to close escrow, the buyer should take time. It's not contractual, it's not mandatory. They can waive that. They can say, I don't want to do it. They can put something in writing that says my agent can do it for me. Although I discourage that, because once we do that, we're accepting some of the liability if they find something that we didn't or whatever. But the final walkthrough is to verify that the things that have been agreed to in writing have been taken care of. Now, what does that mean? So, okay, so you asked me for a termite clearance. Here's a copy of the termite clearance. You asked me for some items to be repaired. Here's a list of the items that was repaired. Go look at them yourself. You know, you needed a GFCI switch in the kitchen by the sink. That's a ground face circuit interrupter. It's they put them close to sinks to make sure that if water splashes in there, it doesn't short out the whole house. So anyway, if we need things like that done, that's what it's to check, is that it is in substantially the same condition as when I made the offer, which means in the meantime, I didn't have a moving van put up onto the front yard and sink. And now I've got holes in my front yard, because that's not the way the property was when I bought it. The items that I asked to be repaired, have those been repaired? And that's what they're out there to look at. I don't know why that door jamb was never crumbled. That didn't come out on the home inspection or anything. Well, maybe somebody moved a couch through it without getting the door open far enough. Things like that can still be taken care of. And that's why it's a good idea to have it done a few days prior to close of escrow, because that still gives you time to get things taken care of. You can call the other agent back and say, hey, you know what? I don't know what happened here, but it doesn't show up in your home inspection report or either of our avids, but the threshold on the front door is all torn up now, or it's gone, or something else. I don't know if they moved it to get furniture through or whatever, but it's not there anymore. All right, so it's not in substantially the same condition. And there may or may not be things that were required to be repaired. This still gives us a little bit of a lever. Well, do you want to get this closed this week, or should I go ahead and hold closing? Should I talk to the lender and find out how many days we can extend this closing? The other agent probably will get those things done, or make every effort to get those things done, or something else can be negotiated. Maybe we're not going to be able to get them done, but we will give $1,000 to the buyers or whatever. Things can happen at that point in time. If you try to do your final walkthrough on the same day that you hand them their keys, you have no levers or hammers or anything else to try to get things taken care of. So try to do those walkthroughs a few days ahead of time. The buyer will sign the loan docs and it gets bundled by escrow. And it will get sent back to whoever the lender is. And they will fund the loan. And they fund the loan, some people know this and some people don't, and that's okay, but they fund the loan to the title company. Some people think that it gets funded to escrow, and escrow has this big pile of checks in here that we get, or a big wire transfer account or something. That's not what happens. The loan funds to the title company. The title company makes sure that all of the loans or tax debt or any of those things that had to be paid off. The title company makes sure that those are done because they have to provide free and clear title. So they're making sure that those loans were paid off. They're not trusting somebody else to pay them off. They're paying them off. Whatever's left after all that's done gets wired to escrow. All right, so the loan funds to the title company, and then the title company goes through and disperses accordingly, and then they wire the money to escrow. So escrow doesn't have it all to start out with. So from an agent standpoint, I want to take a minute or two here to get house keys, get mailbox keys, get remotes ready for the buyer. Yeah, I know we're gonna close here in the next day or two. Let me get all those things ready. Don't be scrambling around at the last minute trying to figure out how to get into a house or having to meet a buyer over there at 8:30 because that was the only time they could meet you. And make those arrangements ahead of time. Get those things done. Don't give out the house keys or the mailbox keys or the remotes or anything else. But make sure that those things are in the process of getting put together. If you've got to collect house keys from the other agent, if the other agent just says, okay, I'm just gonna leave the lockbox on there and then we'll put all the mailbox keys and house keys and everything in the right-hand kitchen drawer or something, all those things are okay, but make those arrangements. Make sure that you understand and that they understand and that everybody understands where and when those are going to be available. So then escrow and title get together and they set up the recording. And recording means that they set it up with the county that you're involved in. Riverside County, Los Angeles County, Orange County, whatever it happens to be, whatever county you're involved in. And they set it up for recording. They say, okay, title is clear. We have all of our funds in. Escrow says they've got the money that the buyer had to bring in to close escrow. So they have their down payment money and stuff. So we have everything together to set it up for recording. And then title calls or goes over to, or whatever their case is. I know that they do both sometimes because sometimes it's they're right across the parking lot because that was the convenience of it when they started doing business. So it's set up with the county for recording. And the county doesn't say, oh my gosh, these people wanted to close early, let's hurry and record that. That conversation doesn't happen. It goes over there as a stack. And the stack may be online, the stack may be handheld and things like that. But it's gonna go over there and the recording office for the county is going to stamp all the recording dates on the paperwork. Or they're gonna be on the computer and typing in all the recording dates. They're gonna record all of that stuff. That's the recording that's going on. And that's going through a stack one by one by one. And and yours may be number 1 on the list, yours may be number 10 on the list, yours may be 150 on the list. So we don't know. We know that it's set for recording today, but we don't know what time that's going to happen. We will be informed of the recording and the confirmation either by for sure we'll be told by our escrow officer that's handling it. We may hear from the title company that says that this is just recorded. Sometimes I get it from the title company before I get it from escrow because they tell us both at the same time, right? They send out a little email that says, congratulations, 54321 Banana Peel Way is just recorded. And now we know that we can give out keys. All right, so make sure that after we're recording, after confirmation, that's when we get out keys. I emphasize that here, after recording, then we can turn over keys. But from this point, title is sending money to escrow. Once it's recorded, once everything's done, title will wire transfer money to escrow. So now escrow has all the funds it needs to disperse. And it, like I say, the loan will be paid off and things like that, but escrow still has to pay the termite guy. And still may have to pay the well guy, or still may have some other fees that are due there. And so escrow disperses funds, and part of the funds that they disperse happens to be this little thing that we like to call commission. And commission is kind of a good thing to have. That's part of it. We don't do all of this for smiles and happy faces. Even though people tell me that, I've had pre-licensing courses before that I've taught. And it's funny because I ask people about their why. Now, why are you getting into real estate? And you know, some people will say, well, because realtors drive nice cars. And because they don't have to work in an office all the time, they can be out on the road. And some people say, oh, well, I like to see houses. I'm like, it's in my blood to go in houses and see what they look like and things. You go, I really, that's why you're doing this? Or they'll say, because I like to make people happy. And you go, oh, well, that's part of it. But you know what? You didn't get in business for that. You got in business for commission. So let's make sure we have all of this stuff done so that we can actually get our commission. We turn over keys to the new owner. Notice it says after recording. I already said that. And that is so true. If you, anytime you start giving out keys ahead of time, or you always set yourself up for some potential problems. So just don't. I'm not saying that there's never an exception to that rule, but it creates a mess more often than it doesn't. And you know what, whether you believe it or not, some people don't tell the truth all the time. And they'll say, okay, I'm gonna give you the keys because I'm not gonna be around for the next few days because it's almost Christmas and things like that. But you can't move in until, and you give them a date or whatever, and they go, oh, don't worry, we won't do that. And then somebody else says, oh, you know what, they were moving in here on Friday. And so people don't always tell you exactly what they have in mind, and they don't do it maliciously. They just do it because they think, well, it really doesn't hurt anything. It's gonna be our house in another day or something anyway, and blah, blah, blah. So TC uploads the last of the paperwork. And at this time, the last of the paperwork has to do with a couple of things like your closed MLS sheet, your settlement statement, your final settlement statement from escrow, and a couple of things like that they're just putting in there to wrap things up. And hopefully they've gotten all the paperwork done up to here. They email compliance to review the title or review the file and approve. And once that's done, then finance is notified if it's all complete and issues an e-check to the agent. E-check is online, and so you'll get a notification from the lovely Veronica, and she will say that your check has been, I can't remember the exact words that come out on there, but basically she will tell you that. Now, I put a little disclaimer on here, not because I think I need to disclaim anything, but I wanted to make sure that you guys understood, and I said it before. The times and circumstances often change during the course of a transaction. Additional forms or paperwork may be needed. One of our many responsibilities to make sure that contract dates are met, amended to new times and dates that both buyer and seller agree upon. This list is a guide, not a guarantee. Keep everyone in the loop. Now, what I basically mean by all of that stuff is almost exactly what it says. You know, you are going to have, anybody who's been in business for a little while knows this already, but those of you that are new, you know that if close of escrow is 30 days, that's not always going to happen. It might. And consider yourself a little bit blessed if that actually happens. And it will be close no matter what, but that 30 days close of escrow, and if you explain that to people up front. That that's a target date. That's what we're hoping for. That's what everybody's shooting for. That's what everybody involved in this agreement is working towards. However, are there things that happen? Yes, we go along and there are things that the termite company goes out there, the wood pest control company goes out. And they start tearing apart the things that they saw that had termites or dry rot or fungus or whatever. And realize that it extends further into the roof than you thought it would, or than they thought it would or something. So now there's additional work that needs to be done. So that delays it maybe a day or two. We have a lender who is waiting for something from somebody, maybe waiting for something from a buyer. Maybe they haven't gotten a final verification of employment. Maybe they have run into problems when they've done a final credit check or something that, because credit can change, things can change, people can lose jobs. There are things that happen along the way that affect these days. So these are target days. And if you look at them as target days, that's what we're trying to keep in mind. All right, so this kind of goes through all of the forms that we have, and I'm not going to go through all of those because we kind of already have in the contract, but it tells you who's necessary, who is the necessary signers on these things. An agency disclosure is between the seller and an agent, or on the sale file, the buyer and the seller and the agent. So it depends on who you're representing, but those are the signatures that need to be in place. So I'm going to talk about a couple things that are going to help you, and we're going to get into escrow here in about a minute and 30 seconds. But if the property is in a trust, then we need a complete copy of the trust agreement. We need to know who is the legal signer on these things. We also need a copy of the death certificate, because if we have a copy of a trust that says that so-and-so is a successor trustee, then that means that the trustee needs to have passed away. So we need to have something that verifies those things. So a complete copy of the trust and a death certificate will identify all of those things. And it won't hold us up in escrow if we get them right off the bat. If title is held as joint tenants with right of survivorship, okay, one of them passed away. Right of survivorship means that the other person now is the sole survivor. So all we need there is a copy of the death certificate. If the deceased was alone on title, then we need letters of testamentary administration. Those are going to be things that come to you either through the court or through an attorney, or may require a court order to sell the house. But whatever that is, that all falls under the heading of a probate, and we may need those things. So if you're dealing with people that aren't the actual owners on title, then we probably need some of this follow-up. The longer it takes you to get this stuff together, the more delayed escrow is, because escrow has to have a copy of all these things. So if you can put those things together ahead of time, that's wonderful. If you're dealing with mobile homes, which is a different story entirely, even though a manufactured home is a single family residence, when you're dealing with those, you need other information, because the mobile home or the manufactured home is actually separate from the property itself. So you need a copy of the registration or certificate of title on the manufactured home. You need to do things like verify your seller's name. You need to verify the year on the mobile. You need to give a copy to escrow when you open it, because escrow needs to know all those things anyway. If the land is not on a permanent foundation, then you have to come up with a separate value for those things. So how much do you think the land would be worth raw? Or how much do you think the land would be worth with improvements? Or how much do you think? And those are going to be educated guesses sometimes, because you don't have a dollar for dollar amount on these things. If it is on a permanent foundation, then you need to call title and get a copy of a recorded 433. Recorded 433 is the code for permanent foundations. So when it's permitted and when it's done the way it's supposed to be done, there will be a recorded 433 on the property. Same thing with death certificates and things here. You need to have a death certificate if people are deceased. All living owners need to sign escrow papers. I know people say sometimes, well, you know what, I had to sign this, my wife doesn't really care, or my husband doesn't really care, or my husband can't sign things anyway. Well, maybe it's time for them to get a power of attorney or something. Because we need those things. Those will help you out. Okay, for just a few minutes. Let me see, let me go. Oh, that's cool. All right, so let's, for just a few minutes, let's go through what escrow does while all of this stuff is being done. You're doing all these other things. Escrow is working concurrently with you to try to get everything done. So right off the bat, they receive a fully executed, clear copy of the contract. All right, and make sure of those things, make sure that whatever you give them is a clear copy, because if they get things where words are pushed together or things are kind of blurred, or your copy machine didn't work quite right, or your scanner didn't work quite right or something, by the time they get them, they're trying to make things out with a magnifying glass. So make sure that you get clear copies. Escrow will order legal investing and opens order with title. The title company of choice. And who chooses the title company? Well, different people do. If I write an offer, I'm going to request that we use my title company, or my favorite one, not one that I own, but my favorite one, or the one that I've been working with for a long time, or somebody who's new to the business. And who knows those situations? Maybe it's the daughter of the seller, or what works for a title company. So when it says company of choice, that's up to sellers and buyers to decide. Escrow types instructions and sends to the listing agent, the seller, the selling agent, the buyer, the mortgage broker, and lender. Okay, so I told you that before. Copies go out to everybody. Review those and make sure they're right. Let's catch them early. Don't set them on the back burner and say, oh, okay, well, escrow instructions are out. And then just wait until you get to week 3 of a 4-week escrow and find out that some of the things aren't correct. Seller's forwarding address is important. So try to get that as soon as you can. Once they're received back from the buyer and all of those kind of things, then they can do things that they have to do, which is like insert the fire insurance information, which hopefully, because it says it in the contract, that your buyer, if you're representing the buyer, has agreed that they will have fire insurance, so they will have homeowners insurance in place. And whether or not there's fire information will depend on what your natural hazard disclosure says with regards to fire. Loan approval, lender will usually request an estimated closing statement. Notice this is an estimated one from escrow for buyer's fees, and usually is a good indication that loan documents are coming soon. Loan docs, once loan docs are received, escrow has to audit the file, remind agents for any last minute items. I need bills, and so they want those things. Documents are signed, notarized, certified, and are made of certain documents and escrow items and overnighted to the lender. So they overnight them to the lender, or there've been a lot of times where we have hand carried those as agents and things. So if we are fortunate enough to be using both our escrow in-house and one of our in-house lenders, it's an easy opportunity for us to just take those into the office. Sometimes it's not, but it will be overnighted one way or the other. As soon as the funder reviews the documents, they will send funding conditions and ask for missing items or corrections needed for funding to escrow and the mortgage broker, if there are any. Funding, all the conditions are in, and escrow and lender will talk about it, and the lender will fund the loan. Meaning, and we talked about this before, meaning disperse the loan it funds to title. So setting up recording, we went over this before, but this is the This is your part versus, I mean, this is escrow's part versus what your part is. They set it up for recording, title record upon verification of everything. And notice that it says here, and this is a hopefully happens. It doesn't happen every time and things like that. But if we get recordings basically happen at 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Fridays and the last business day of the month. So they basically have it timed for them to be able to get things taken care of and get home for the weekend and things. So recording at 8 requires everything to be set up by 4 the prior business day. So if you came in this morning and said, okay, is everything done? And you got the last year's stuff in and the lender says loan docs, we're ready to fund and things. And it's this morning at what time is it? 10:40. Okay, so 10:40, we possibly can still get it set up on the 2 o'clock recording time, but we're not going to get it on the morning one. That means you're going to find out late in the day whether or not it made it. On special recordings, depending on the title company, they do special recordings occasionally. And it has to do usually with heading into holidays and things like that, because they don't want people to have to wait 3 or 4 days to find out if they got their house. So that's what all those things are. Here's some of the little acronyms that I was using, you know, COE, close of escrow, GD, grant deed, all those things. So that's just kind of to help you out there. And this is kind of what we just covered, except for it's on the side. Let's see. I don't know if I can rotate that without rotating everything. Let me see. Yep, there you go. That's a lot better. Okay, there we go. So here's the tax timeline. Why is that important? Well, it's not important really to you as the agent, but you may give this to the buyer so that they understand when their taxes are due. July, so here November 1st is the first installment of taxes for the current tax year becomes due and payable, right? And both installments may be made at the same time. So that happens here. July 1st starts a new tax year. So I know that sounds strange, but because of income taxes being done in April and corporate taxes being, anyway, because of all the tax times and things, it's established a long time ago that the tax year for property taxes starts July 1st. November, the first installment becomes due. February 1st, the second installment becomes due. So all those things happen like that. The bills for the new tax year become available in October. And you have to pay them on or before December 10th. And then the second installment is before April 10th. If not, you incur penalties. So just something for you to let your buyer know if you need to. There's also a little thing called supplemental taxes. And I'm going to cover that real quickly. But some of your buyers and or sellers will get a supplemental tax bill later on in the year, not at one of these times, not included with your regular property taxes. But it's a supplemental tax bill, and they'll come screaming at you and say, I have this tax bill for $2,200 or whatever, and they'll want to, and the seller wants to know what it is, or the buyer wants to know what it is. Why is it? Okay, so here's what happens for a supplemental tax bill. You know that your taxes are established because of Prop 13 that passed a lot of years ago, which we're all very thankful for. But because of Prop 13, your tax base and rate and everything is established when the house is sold. So I bought a house a little over 20 years ago, same house I live in today. Bought a house about 20 years ago. I paid the huge amount of $129,000 for it. That was 20 years ago, so things were a little different then. But I paid $129,000 for it. My tax was based on $129,000. So it was $129,000, it was something like $1,600 a year. In taxes, so I pay 800 at the first and 800 at the second. And then it increased a little bit over the years, it increased by a couple of percent here and there. If I sold my house today, I would probably sell it for $500,000. It's not a big house or anything, but I'd probably sell it for $500,000. Or pretty close to it. Whoever the new owner is going to pay their taxes on $500,000. However, all of the taxes that were figured into escrow and everything were based on the taxes that I was paying. Right? So there's a difference in what I was paying, which was, $1,600 or whatever it happened to be, and the $6,000 a year that somebody's going to have to pay on it now. And so there's a difference in there from what they thought they were going to have to do and what they actually have to do. There are also supplemental taxes as a result of I bought the house and if I put in a pool, it wasn't necessarily re-evaluated or reappraised or reassessed is what they call it, assessed. But if I did room additions, if I did put in a pool, if I did things like that, that increased the value to the buyer, the new buyer, but it really didn't affect me. But the existing owner took care of putting in a bunch of those things, which increased the value, which even does more towards the tax assessor's supplemental evaluation of the property. So now when the appraisal comes in, everything's recorded. Now it's recorded instead of as a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, whatever, 1,800 square feet. Now it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,100 square feet. And I have a pool. Well, I've made some adjustments there, which a new buyer's going to pay for and things. So anyway, there's some discrepancies there in the tax thing. So, and it's kind of at the tax assessor's discretion. I put that on there because the tax assessor doesn't necessarily come out to the house. They just look at what the new recorded property says. And the new recorded property is different than the property that I bought 20 years ago. So there's a difference in tax valuation, and the buyer will get to eat some of that, or the seller will get to pay some of that based on what the new evaluation is. So it's not something for you to get too caught up in, but if you have a deal that gets a tax supplement down the road, one of the probably the easiest thing to do, and I know they wouldn't want me to say this, but they might, and that is that refer them to the tax assessor's office or refer them back to escrow to see if they can help explain what their specific thing was, because they're all different depending on what's going on. I can't even give you a whole list of all the things that can affect that one way or the other. So with that in mind, we have taken a house from getting a signed offer all the way through closing escrow. So are there any questions before we sign off?
No questions, but I'm embarrassed to say I've never known all this information, and thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And that's, that there's a lot of things that happen that we don't know about, Lynn. We just kind of go through it, but it's good from a real estate standpoint. It's good from an agent standpoint or a broker standpoint to know what is happening along the way, because there's nothing worse for you as an agent or nothing worse for a client than to not know what's going on and not have anybody that can actually explain it to them and things. So this kind of puts you in a better place, kind of makes you a little more knowledgeable, gives you a little more confidence when you're answering questions and things. And that's what makes your value. So it's good to know. All right, everybody, it's Friday, so I'm sure you all have last minute shopping plans for the next couple of days. That seems to be the last week I've been seeing on advertisements or on the radio anyway, as I've been driving around, they keep advertising all of these last minute Christmas sales, so. If you have to get out there, but try to do some work in the meantime. And I will. See, I'm trying to think, I think we have a class. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but I think we have one class next week. Either Monday or Tuesday. But it's in the morning, so you still have Tuesday. Yeah, we might change that, but anyway, see you soon.